everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
DanMachi, why am I being crowned the Lord of Cinder? Chapter 133 to 143, Chapter 133, a vast net called conspiracy is being woven. 1289 words Sacred Seal. In Elden Ring, it is the essential item for using incantations. Ron was naturally more than familiar with it. And the glintstone he had unexpectedly obtained after killing the watchdog behind the fog gate allowed him to see the possibility of using faith-based incantations in the world of DanMachi. Putting aside for the moment whether he actually possessed faith or not, once he had equipment like a sacred seal, the basic conditions were already fulfilled, the rest would depend on how to obtain it. Looks like it feels pretty good. It was quite an unexpected surprise. By contrast, after the Sekiro template rose to LV3, it did not bring particularly many changes. But relying solely on the mobility it possessed was already more than sufficient. After burning the parchment that recorded the engraved ability values into ashes, Ron turned his gaze toward Hestia beside him. Not forgetting Daphne and Cassandra waiting outside the room, he spoke with an easy smile, "Lady Hestia." Daphne and Cassandra of the former Apollo Familia, they read both LV, two adventurers. They just mentioned to me that they want to join the Familia. I wonder what your thoughts are. Actually, Ron could make this kind of decision himself. But after hearing the detailed explanation of their identities, Hestia inevitably frowned, not because they had once belonged to the Apollo Familia. The main reason was that these two adventurers were both women. When recruiting Familia members, of course, one cannot discriminate based on gender. Even talent is not the most important thing, the key lies in the character they possess. Anyone Ron could recommend at the very least met the standards for the Familia's development in every respect. And expeditions into the dungeon, those would always have to be faced eventually. She did not reject the proposal. It was just that. For some reason, the girl felt a faint sense of jealousy. I don't have any objections. After all, when we go explore the middle floors and the deep floors in the future, our current size definitely won't be enough. As long as they fit the Familia. Of course we should recruit them. In the end, Hestia could not help but mutter softly. What's going on? Aside, it feels like there are more and more women around you, Ron. Fate, I guess. He could even sense the faint resentment in the girl's tone. Ron's expression did not change. Becoming the Lord of Cinder in the dungeon, and building a harem, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. He wasn't lying. Facing the feelings he held for Hestia deep in his heart, he added seriously, but I think Lady Hestia is the best. That's more like it. Yet he still hadn't proposed to her or anything. The girl raised her brows slightly. Hestia did not forget the matter at hand, but even when bringing it up, her tone could not help carrying a trace of emotion. There's another matter. About your title. Because of the war game with the Apollo Familia, the Donatus was delayed. Now your level has already broken through to LV, and yet even the title from when you were LV2 still hasn't been decided. After this war game, the feat Ron had created before countless gods in Orarioshi could already imagine how lively the Donatus would be. If you have any ideas about a title, I think with the current situation, there's a high probability we can secure the title you want at the meeting. Hestia's tone was certain. Tarnished. When he obtained the Ashen One character save slot, Ron had already considered the title Lord of Cinder. But with his current strength, he was still far from deserving that title. Since he had the right to choose, of course he would pursue something that sounded better. Then it's this one. Tarnished. Perhaps it carried other meanings. But since it was the title Ron wanted, as a goddess she would certainly help fight for it. Hestia was already filled with anticipation for what would come next. After Ron left the master bedroom, the first thing that came into view were Daphne and Cassandra waiting outside the door, their eyes full of unease. He did not keep them in suspense. His tone was relaxed. I can only help you up to this point. Whether you pass or not mainly depends on Lady Hestia's decision. The chances should be quite high. Thank you. Being able to do this much was already enough for Daphne to feel grateful to Ron. They had only just met, and even half a day ago they had been enemies, yet he could still do this much. Now that things had reached this point, what needed to be done next was to do their best to seize this hard-won opportunity. Noticing the boy's figure pause briefly, she hesitated for a moment before explaining seriously, "If there's a chance to become comrades who fight side by side. No matter what, I will not betray this trust." That was Ron's requirement for companions of the Familia. Even if their talent was slightly lacking, they could still gain rapid improvement within the harsh environment of a Souls-like dungeon. The most unacceptable outcome would be that after experiencing the Souls-like malice of attacking one's weak point, they would in turn throw the key information out to the outside world, causing the path of an adventurer to be cut off in advance. He looked directly into Daphne's eyes and nodded with a light smile. "I'm looking forward to it. I hope the talent you possess can develop within the Hestia Familia." Dionysus Familia. Among the many events that had recently occurred in Rio, the most eye-catching was undoubtedly the war game between the Apollo Familia and the Hestia Familia. As a spectator, Dionysus naturally had not missed this grand spectacle. The final result had also completely exceeded his expectations. The miracle created by Ron, a newcomer adventurer who had never been heard of in Rio before, was truly astonishing. It was estimated that it would not take long before he possessed strength comparable to Sword Princess Ace Wallenstein. For Rio, that was definitely a good thing. However, it only made Dionysus's mood grow increasingly worse. The final deadline for the Black Dragon's subjugation is drawing ever closer, and Orario's geniuses will continue to appear in this autumn reign. He knew the time left for him was running out. If he wanted to successfully carry out the Madness plan, completely destroy the labyrinth city of Rio, and turn this city known as the center of the world into ruins, it had to be executed before Orario's power had fully accumulated. Noticing the elf girl who had once again returned from the dungeon, her expression filled with regret, Dionysus frowned and could not help asking, "Philvis, regarding the recent dungeon anomalies, have you gained any new findings?" "Not for the moment." The black-haired elf called Philvis had no trace of soul in the depths of her eyes, and there was even occasional chaos flickering within them. During this period, she had carried out a comprehensive exploration of the upper floors without leaving anything out. The middle floors had not been spared either. But the final result had been unsatisfactory. It's as if they appeared out of thin air. Dionysus had already expected this. Just as he was thinking about how to act next, Ron, who had recently begun to stand out in Rio, suddenly flashed through his mind, and a bold speculation arose. "Set this matter aside for now. Your next mission is to investigate Ron, the adventurer of the Hestia Familia. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 134, Chapter 134, The White 1343 Words at the Communal Dormitory. After the end of this war game, they had obtained the Familia residence that had belonged to Apollo. Naturally, Mikoto had to return once to pack up her belongings and prepare to move. Most importantly, the rent that would now be saved, together with the income earned from the Familia's dungeon expeditions, could all be sent by Lord Takamikazuchi to the younger brothers and sisters at the Far East Orphanage. However, when facing the war god Takamikazuchi once again, she did so as a member of the Hestia Familia. Just like usual, the girl resembled an adventurer who had left home to work elsewhere, and was now sharing her final gains with her family. During this period, whether it was exploring the dungeon, or the things that happened in Rio, everything overall has been very fulfilling. Lady Hestia's attitude has also been very good. The gentleman dressed in a kimono, with his black hair tied into a braid, did not interrupt. Instead, he simply listened in the role of a listener, his eyes filled with relief. His child had not caused trouble for Hestia. In fact, from the lively tone in Mikoto's voice, Takamikazuchi could almost see that stubborn little girl from the Far East who had always carried a resilient spirit now finally grown up. And she had found the path that would let her keep moving forward. With Ron's help, my adventurer level successfully rose to LV. I just don't know why it feels like even after leveling up, during this war game, I still didn't help very much. When Ron was mentioned, the frustration hidden deep in the girl's heart could be clearly felt. But Takumi Kazuchi felt this was simply something perfectly reasonable. Even he himself, after personally witnessing that battle with absolutely no suspense, as the war god, could not help but applaud Ron's outstanding performance. A newcomer who had dreamed of becoming an adventurer, who had not even mastered the basics of swordsmanship, yet in an extremely short time, had grown to his current level. An undeniable miracle. Takumi Kazuchi sighed softly and shook his head, his eyes filled with emotion as he said, "It's not just you, even I never imagined he would grow so quickly." There was something he did not say. Perhaps in the not-too-distant future, the world itself would write an entirely new chapter because of Ron's appearance and usher in the dazzling era that belonged solely to him. Just focus on doing your best. Don't compare yourself with those monster-like geniuses. Keep your feet on the ground and steadily improve yourself. I believe that the future you possess, Mikoto, is just as broad. Thank you, Lord Takumi Kazuchi. Go ahead and take care of your moving for now. I should also go guide the newcomers. Recently, a group of children arrived in Rio, so there's no need to worry about the familia. Our members have already been replenished. Not only that. As Takumi Kazuchi said this, his gaze passed through the window and stopped on the figure of a white-haired boy in the courtyard who was training diligently. What he possessed was the same diligence comparable to Ron's. His tone could not help but carry a trace of anticipation. I also encountered a very outstanding child in Rio. Don't slack off, be careful, he might catch up to you. I will continue to work hard. Mikoto nodded firmly. Following Takumi Kazuchi's gaze, she looked toward the white-haired boy in the courtyard. The familiar environment, the same serious attitude toward basic training the girl seemed to see, in this junior newcomer, the shadow that had once belonged to Ron. After all, it had been Ron who brought it up. After briefly asking Daphne and Cassandra about their goals and thoughts, Hestia approved their application and allowed them to join the familia. When she saw the talents those two girls possessed, she finally understood the reason. Adventurers in Rio who possess command ability are very rare. Daphne had once served as the commander of the Apollo Familia, and also possessed the magic Ramur, which could increase the defense of team members. As for the other member named Cassandra, she could take on the role of a healer. It was because of the special skill she had mastered, 5-dimension Troya. It was hard to imagine that a special skill even the gods themselves could not interpret would appear in her own familia one after another. Why does it feel like? As a god, I haven't played any role at all in the development of the familia. Ron has been the one quietly putting in all the effort behind the scenes. The girl's heart was filled with emotion. It was just as her close friend Hephaestus had once said, Ron had been the one holding up this rundown familia, while she, the goddess, was basically the familia's mascot. She only wanted to stand up straight now. So what if she was the mascot? With the current size of the familia, if one were to calculate strictly according to Orario's laws rounding it up, it could almost be considered their shared property. Setting aside the material conditions, the size of the membership had already reached a very astonishing level. They had Ron and Mikoto as 2 LV, 3 adventurers, as well as the LV, 2 adventurers Daphne and Cassandra. When once again facing the familia expeditions that the Adventurers Guild could issue at any time, Hestia believed that, with their current scale, they at least no longer needed to worry too much about overall safety. After leaving the room, she did not forget tonight's celebration banquet. Nor did she treat anyone differently. Looking at the 2 new members standing somewhat at a loss by the door, she explained seriously, in the evening, we'll eat at the Hostess of Fertility. It will serve as your welcome ceremony, as well as the celebration banquet for the victory in the war game. After giving this simple explanation, the girl began to busy herself with other matters. Only Daphne and Cassandra, who had just successfully become members of the Hestia Familia, remained standing there in a daze. They looked at each other, their expressions somewhat strange. There was no exclusion at all. They could clearly feel the friendliness of their new goddess, yet their former familia had only just disbanded, and now they were about to attend a banquet celebrating the victory of the war game. A celebration banquet like that. If we go attend it, is that really appropriate? Let's attend. Facing her close friend's confusion, Daphne smiled and nodded. Although she had not yet completely integrated into it, she liked the relaxed atmosphere of the familia now. A brand new platform, a brand new beginning. She was already eager to begin looking forward to the future of the Hestia familia. Cassandra, you need to put your energy into the Hestia familia. The girl responded timidly. She held the pillow she had long been used to sleeping with in her arms, her gaze sweeping across this familia residence that felt both familiar and yet full of unfamiliarity. Meaning that, from now on, she could still live here. However, when Cassandra remembered her marginal position in the Apollo familia, the worry in her eyes gradually overshadowed the joy of remaining here. It seemed Daphne noticed what she was thinking. And one more thing. Daphne did not forget to add, those strange dreams of yours, try not to mention them in front of Lady Hestia or Captain Ron. It's for your own good. Cassandra did not know what to say. After all, in her dreams, the destruction of the Apollo familia had happened right before her eyes. But if she completely ignored it, she found it very hard to convince her own heart. She could not understand why no one would believe her. That young man's handsome face suddenly came to mind, and she murmured softly, perhaps Captain Ron might believe what I say. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 135, Chapter 135, Seer, why is this guy's soul on fire? 1,283 words. Having just broken through to LV3, the pace of dungeon exploration would not be that fast. At the very least, he needed to adapt to his own strength first before considering heading to the middle floors. Most importantly, Ron still had many matters to deal with in Ora Rio. Without the help given by Rio, the outcome might not have been as smooth as he had imagined. There was also Anya, who had sparred with him, and Mamma Mia, who had shown him kindness. He did not believe he possessed particularly noble virtues. But toward those adventurers who had offered kindness and help, if he did not properly express his gratitude, then his whole life would truly have been lived in vain. Once again, he stood inside the pub Hostess of Fertility. The first thing that came into view was Seer, whose temperament resembled that of a friendly girl next door. When she noticed that Ron had arrived alone, she quickly withdrew her gaze. If Hestia had been present, this game would have ended very quickly. Recalling the miracle the boy before her had created, the color in Seer's eyes was especially bright as she said seriously, Mr. Ron, I didn't expect you to be such an exceptionally outstanding adventurer. At least in Ora Rio in recent years, I haven't seen anyone like you. The girl stepped aside to make room in the entrance to the restaurant, sincerely praising Ron's talent from the bottom of her heart. If his goddess had not been Hestia seriously, it would have been hard for Seer not to develop other thoughts. Breaking the world record and becoming the fastest adventurer to reach LV. 2. I heard that after adventurers undergo a level up, they can obtain a title. Ron, have you thought about what title you want? I do have an idea. Faced with Seer's question, Ron did not choose to hide it. I've already told Lady Hestia about it. I just don't know whether the other gods will agree. The girl lightly raised a hand to cover her mouth. She leaned forward slightly. When she tilted her head, her light gray eyes were filled with lively playfulness. But when her gaze met Ron's faintly smiling eyes, a trace of stiffness appeared in Seer's pupils. Compared with before, the extremely mottled colors of that soul, the radiance of the soul Ron possessed now made even her feel somewhat unable to describe it. It was still that same colorful, chaotic wickedness. Yet now, his soul seemed to be burning with flames that could not be extinguished. And the light it emitted was enough to make even the gods feel wary. So strange. She could not think of any reason. Why was Ron's soul burning so much so that the flames produced by that burning could, to some extent, even threaten the dignity of a god? Even if a god in Rio were sent back to the heavens, it merely meant that their physical body in Rio had been destroyed, preventing them from returning to the lower world. Cinder, to be precise, the goddess of beauty, Freya seemed to imagine an extremely interesting scene. The trace of surprise in her eyes was perfectly concealed. She asked seriously, "Could you tell me what title you're planning to take?" "Tarnished." After receiving the boy's exact answer, Cinder softly murmured it to herself. Compared with Hestia's confusion, from her perspective it seemed somewhat understandable. When the geniuses of Rio truly encounter Ron, will they all appear dull and colorless by comparison? Perhaps so. Cinder smiled and nodded, offering a sincere blessing. "Ron, I believe that with your talent, you'll definitely obtain the title you want." Because she would support him without holding anything back. "Thank you, Miss Cinder." Ron showed no wariness toward her identity as the goddess of beauty, mainly because he believed that he did not meet any of the standards required to become her chosen partner. He walked to the counter. When he faced Mamma Mia, the pub owner, the foolish cat Anya, and the hopeless elf in the distance who was wiping plates, seeing the joy in their eyes, he felt it was necessary to fulfill his promise. Ron raised his head. Facing the approving gaze of the shop owner, he suggested, "Mamma Mia, how about taking it a little easy tonight and celebrating here in the pub?" As expected, I didn't misjudge this kid. But faced with Ron's invitation, Mia smiled and shook her head. Even though her tone sounded reproachful, there was still deep concern in it. "Don't get carried away. Because right now, you've only just truly stepped onto the stage of Rio. There will be plenty of places where you'll need money in the future. But I can consider letting Rio and Anya get off work early today." Mamma Mia is the best, Naya, the foolish cat girl's joy seemed contagious. Even the elf girl, whose expression was usually calm and unreadable, had the corner of her beautiful lips slightly curve upward. And next came the celebration banquet. Last night, the pub hostess of fertility was extremely lively. It was only after Hestia finished drinking that the situation took a rather subtle turn. Perhaps it was also because of the alcohol. Their goddess, under the strange gazes of Daphne and Cassandra, clutched a wine bottle and lay across the table, drunkenly shouting certain things. Such as, "I like you," and "When are you going to marry me," and the like. This was probably the unavoidable trouble that came with being too outstanding. But overall, this celebration banquet successfully melted the somewhat unfamiliar atmosphere within the familia. In the following days, Ron did not rashly lead the team to explore the middle floors. Instead, as usual, he remained in Rio, adapting to the condition of his body after the level up. That way, in the more dangerous dungeon, he could ensure that the team would return safely. Until the moment he once again saw the thin figure of the girl Lily outside the familia residence, his calm training routine was broken again. Xanis is selling off his assets in Rio. He's also squeezed all the Valis out of the familia members. There's a high chance that next, he's planning to run away and completely leave Rio. There was no revenge more satisfying than watching Xanis flee in disgrace. And this also allowed Lily to see hope of leaving the Soma familia. She told Ron in detail all the information she had organized over the past 2 days. Their first meeting. Fortunately, it had not left Ron with any bad impressions. However, when her gaze briefly swept toward the familia residence now renamed Huthfar Manor, the trace of longing deep in Lily's eyes was quickly hidden. "What should we do next?" "I understand. Xanis certainly had money. Now that the Apollo familia had completely disbanded, there was no reason for Xanis, who had helped them, to simply take all the assets and comfortably withdraw from Rio. Ron nodded lightly. Looking calmly at Lily, he said with a smile, "Lead the way." Meanwhile, Hestia once again stood before Babel Tower. Her eyes were filled with expectation. She was not heading to the dungeon, instead, her destination was the Donatus, the meeting of the gods being held today. She would fight for the right to name the title of her most beloved child. No matter what, she had to win the final victory in this smokeless battlefield. If there truly was no other way, the goddess would not mind letting those troublesome gods experience the shock of Ron's talent. Hestia, you can definitely do it. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 136, Chapter 136, The Road Ends Here. 1349 Words The Soma Familia. Xanas could finally understand what the lower members of the Familia had felt when they were oppressed by him, the constant anxiety every day, as if treading on thin ice. It truly felt unpleasant. If you're weak, why not look for the reason in yourself? Have you properly developed in Aura Rio? Have you seriously gone into the dungeon to train? And then the boomerang came back even faster than he had expected. When the war game of the Apollo Familia had completely failed, Xanas knew that the help he had secretly provided them would absolutely not remain hidden. There was no other way. He did not want to be treated like a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered, so the only thing he could do was escape Aura Rio. The good news. Right after the war game ended, Ron was very busy, and had no time to deal with him. Even though the time was short, he still managed, through the members of the Soma Familia, to squeeze out the last bit of profit and sell off the fixed assets. Carrying a total of 20 million valis, he would leave Aura Rio and go live in another city. Even so, Xanas did not believe that the root of the problem lay with himself. If the Apollo Familia had been a bit more capable, or if that guy Ron had never appeared in Aurario, then the power and status he possessed would have been impossible for anyone to shake. Why can't you just die? Looking at the Soma Familia's residence, Xanas's eyes were filled with hatred. The culprit who had forced him to leave Aura Rio and ruined his bright future stood before him, yet he had no means of revenge. Just as he withdrew his gaze and was about to board the carriage to leave, a very familiar voice suddenly came from behind him, its tone filled with surprise but even more with teasing. "Captain Xanas, where are you planning to go?" Xanas's body instantly stiffened. But when he saw clearly that the one mocking him was Lilaruka Arde, who stood at the very bottom of the Familia, as a supporter yet possessed the magic Cinder, a nearly tangible fury surged up, threatening to swallow his reason. "I was just thinking about whether I should look for you before leaving Aura Rio." With the magic Cinder, and most importantly with strength still unable to resist him, bringing her to the city of Vice might even allow him to rebuild his influence. At that thought, the anger in Xanas's eyes was quickly suppressed. He took the initiative to propose, "Are you interested in leaving the Soma Familia and coming with me to develop in the city of Vice? In a familia like this, where the god completely doesn't intervene, there's no meaning in staying here." "Of course. There isn't. Captain Xanas, why do you think I came to look for you privately?" What she had suffered in the Soma Familia, most of it could not be separated from him. Facing Xanas's invitation, Lily refused without the slightest hesitation. At this moment, only a smile of relief remained on her face. Without giving him the chance to become angry out of humiliation, she looked behind him. The girl spoke in a relaxed tone, "Why don't you take a look behind you, Captain Xanas?" Gradually realizing that something was wrong, when Xanas turned his head, he noticed that the retreat route had already been cut off, as well as Ron's highly recognizable face, one he would never forget no matter what. The last trace of luck in his eyes completely went out. His pupils suddenly contracted, and his arms trembled continuously from fear. When facing Ron, Xanas could not even muster the thought of resisting. The matter of the Apollo Familia. It was definitely a misunderstanding. They forced me to do it. It wasn't that I wanted to send members to monitor you. Right, I can compensate you for your mental losses. 20 million valis. What do you think? At this point, he even did not forget to drag Lily into it. "As long as you let me leave Aurario, let me take Lilaruka Arde with me when I leave Aura Rio. I guarantee I will absolutely never come back in the future." Even now, he still wanted to drag her into that bottomless mire. After hearing Xanas's proposal, the relaxed string in Lily's heart tightened again. She knew that in front of Ron, she had no value at all. If Ron really agreed to Xanas's request, she could imagine the miserable ending even with her eyes closed. Even the look in her eyes when she looked at Ron was filled with pleading. It is indeed a good proposal. The girl's face turned ashen. But before the feeling of despair could swallow her, she heard Ron's casual addition. Only, in the current timeline, Lilaruka Arde had not provoked him. She had even provided quite a lot of information and opportunities to make money. Ron had no intention of kicking someone when they were already down. He drew the short sword tied to his leg and said with an easy smile, "You and Lily are both not important to me, but not having you, to me, is very important. Besides, as long as you disappear completely, won't all the property belong to me?" Then, the former captain of the Soma Familia, Xanas, welcomed his destined death. Babel Tower. At the top floor where the Gods' Council was held. The last time she had come here was also the previous time, but back then it had been to wait for the drawing ceremony for the Apollo Familia's war game. Now Hestia had come as the victor, striving to obtain the naming right for her beloved Familia member. The Familia ranking had not yet been updated, and was still at the original marginal position. However, the current her was no longer the inconspicuous fringe goddess she had been at the beginning. The Familia member you recruited is indeed very outstanding. Also participating in this God's Council was Hermes. He had already been familiar with Hestia back in the heavens, but he truly had not imagined that in such a short time she could develop her Familia to this extent. He had originally planned to introduce an interesting child to Hestia, but the current state of her Familia was obviously not suitable for newcomers to develop. I watched the war game. Somehow, when I look at Ron, I feel as if I see the shadow of an old acquaintance. Hermes spoke with a tone full of emotion. As for that so-called acquaintance, it was naturally Althea of the Hera Familia. Yet he could not help feeling curious. Both were geniuses. So who would ultimately be the superior one? Of course, Ron is absolutely the most talented and most hard-working child I have ever seen. Today's God's Council is to help him obtain the title he wants. Hermes, give me a hand. When mentioning Ron, the pride in Hestia's voice seemed almost to overflow. But she had not forgotten the objective of attending this meeting. After all, back in the divine realm, she truly had not maintained good relationships with many of the other gods. There were only a few she was familiar with. And Demeter, Mayak, Takamikazuchi, and Hephaestus she had already asked all the connections she could. Even so, she still felt it was not secure enough. No problem. Hermes did not mind doing a favor that cost him nothing. Setting aside Bel Cranel, the terrifying talent Ron possessed was indeed worthy of attention. Yet he could not help being curious about the path Ron had chosen. Could it really be that this guy could become the hero who would ultimately save the world? He lightly shrugged and said frankly, "But if the other gods want to come up with strange and bizarre titles, then there's nothing that can be done. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 137, Chapter 137, The Hyena, the Backdoor Demolisher, and the Tarnished 1338 words the Gods' Council. As more and more deities arrived, the host of the meeting, the elephant god Ganesha, always maintained extremely high enthusiasm for occasions where the gods gathered together. Stir things up. This time, there were a total of 7 adventurers who needed to have their titles decided. Ganesha looked at the documents in his hand. As his gaze swept across them, the people listed at the front failed to arouse his interest. Only the adventurer at the very bottom of the documents, Ron, was able to generate strong interest in him. Including the many deities present at the scene, there were even quite a few rare faces. Even with his eyes closed, Ganesha could guess exactly who they had come for. But how could the protagonist of a meeting appear right at the beginning? I am Ganesha. The objective of this God's Council, I believe all of you understand very clearly. That is to grant titles to the adventurers who have recently ascended to LV2 in Rio. First, the one from Even though Ganesha's tone was passionate, and he tried his utmost to heat up the atmosphere at the venue, it produced no effect whatsoever. Occasionally, a deity would propose a suggestion for an adventurer's title. But that was merely to fight for the children of their own familia. Even those idle fellows who usually had nothing better to do did not even have the idea of interrupting, let alone Hestia, who wished to fight for a title that Ron would want. Agree to whatever suggestions the other deities propose. By using this method, she could at least leave a good impression on those deities at minimum. When it was her turn to speak, she would not have established too many opponents. There shouldn't be a problem, right? The girl supported her cheeks with both hands. Her slightly childish face was filled with worry. The strangely silent atmosphere at the venue, no deity caused trouble, but this did not reassure Hestia. Instead, her mood gradually became more tense. And the development of events did not go beyond her expectations. When the adventurer list reached the final entry, Ganesha, wearing the elephant trunk mask, stepped directly onto the table. His gaze swept across the deities present. The adventurer who needs to be granted a title, surely the deities present already know his name. Let us open the curtain with the most enthusiastic applause. From the Hestia Familia. He broke the world record for the fastest breakthrough and shortened the time to 16 days. In the war game against the Apollo Familia, he created a miracle that belongs to him. His name is... And when it came to heating up the atmosphere, no one was more skilled than Ganesha. He pointed the microphone toward the deities present. Although it had no amplification effect, the burst of discussion that erupted was still unprecedentedly heated. I've finally been waiting for this guy. Some deities who had originally been seated at the table even feared their voices would be drowned out by others. They all stood up one after another, and in an instant the atmosphere became as noisy as a marketplace. Damn it, I've already thought of what title to give this guy. God Bankruptcy Machine. All the Valis I worked so hard to save are completely gone. Even though a bet is a bet, when it comes to the matter of titles, I must say a few words. Wouldn't that be a bit too frivolous? Among them, there was also a deity who enjoyed watching the commotion, and did not mind making things worse. Smiling, he suggested, have you all forgotten what happened to Apollo? How about this guy's title? Backdoor Demolisher. The world was far too noisy. It was completely out of place compared to the earlier silence when suggestions had first been raised. As the deity involved in the matter, when Hestia heard the endless stream of titles, the girl could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. Sure enough. These guys, after holding it in for so long, were definitely up to no good. As the host of the Gods' Council, Ganesha did not allow the noise to continue unchecked. After bringing the venue back under control, he cast his gaze toward Hestia at the edge. As the deity of the adventurer, she was allowed to propose a title suggestion. However, whether it could ultimately pass would be decided by the vote of the deities present. At the same time, they also possessed the right to nominate titles for the adventurer. Regarding the title of your Familia member Ron, do you have any suggestion? Whether she could secure the title Ron wanted in such a chaotic setting was also an unknown for Hestia. She slowly stood up, her tone firmer than ever before. Regarding Ron's title, there is already a clear target. Tarnished. After stating it, the girl swept a pleading gaze across the deities present, hoping it could pass smoothly. As for the worst outcome, she had already prepared the corresponding countermeasures. I hope everyone can give it a chance. Very well. The current candidate title is tarnished. Do any of you have additional suggestions? Ganesha did not mind giving Ron an opportunity. But the procedures that had to be followed absolutely could not be skipped. When the actual title selection truly began, the deities who understood Ron's potential did not start a farce like before, though there were still those who enjoyed watching the commotion. Backdoor Demolisher. Super Rookie. But when Ganesha's gaze stopped on Loki, he asked, Loki, what do you think? It was not retaliation for the wager. Rather, it was the enormous debt owed to Hephaestus and Ron's performance in the war game that gave Loki a pressing sense like a hyena tearing at its prey. With both hands behind her head, her posture extremely relaxed, she narrowed her eyes and said casually, "Then call him Brown Hyena." "Very well. Since the candidate titles have already been determined, it will be left to the deities present to vote. You each have 3 voting opportunities. The one with the highest number of votes will be confirmed as Ron's adventurer title. Backdoor Demolisher." A total of 23 deities raised their hands. Super Rookie. 40 votes. Meanwhile, Brown Hyena, proposed by Loki of Orario's strongest faction, temporarily obtained 61 votes, far ahead of all the title nominations present. After all, no matter what, Ron was a member of the Hestia Familia, and whatever title he received had nothing to do with them. Ganesha's gaze swept across the gods. The title Tarnished, proposed by Ron's Familia's deity, Hestia. Please cast your votes. There were not few deities who agreed. Most of them were deities who had interacted with Hestia in Tenkai, and did not mind supporting her in a matter like this. However, compared with Loki's proposal, the number of votes was clearly much lower. Consider it a corresponding payment for the lively Orario of the future. She had remained silent the entire time. But when the title Tarnished, which Ron wanted, was clearly behind the other nominations, the beautiful goddess Freya's gaze shifted as she looked around at the gods present. She was considering announcing her own interpretation of the title Tarnished. Yet instead, the goddess seated at the edge of the meeting seemed unable to remain seated. Hestia stood up. "Everyone. If I remember correctly, every time an adventurer undergoes a level up, they have the right to obtain a brand new title, and titles cannot be repeated. In that case, I have no objection to the title Brown Hyena." Facing the curious, probing, and teasing gazes of the gods present, she spoke in a relaxed tone, "Then we won't need to hold another gods' council when the time comes. Next, let's just fast forward to selecting Ron's title for LV. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 138. Chapter 138. The gods decide Ron's title 1954 words. Next, let's fast forward to selecting Ron's LV3 title. What kind of statement was that? Did it mean that they disliked the title Brown Hyena, and even did not want it to spread throughout Orario, so they intended to use this divine council to update the title again? The gods present looked at one another. But the answer to the question ultimately pointed toward Ron. After all, in the war game, the combat power this guy had displayed was not the level of strength an adventurer who had only recently undergone level ascension could possess. For an adventurer to ascend in level, it only required that the ability values reach AD rating. If the achievements were sufficient, the requirements for ability values could even be relaxed somewhat. For this new star who had broken the world record, perhaps all aspects had already met the requirements. It was just that. Hestia's behavior, in the eyes of many of the gods present, was somewhat lacking in consideration. Matters such as titles could be overwritten. Even if she was dissatisfied with the title Brown Hyena, there was no need to gamble the future of her familia and act out of momentary emotion. As the host of the meeting, Ganesha looked toward Hestia. Rarely, he did not fan the flames and instead advised, "Could it be a little too rash? The talent Ron possesses. All the gods present have seen it. Continuing to accumulate and striving to reach the extreme at each level would be more suitable for his long-term development. As for the matter of the title, even if you are truly dissatisfied, it can be discussed again." Although Ron truly might be able to break through continuously to LV3 within a month, adventurers did not pursue speed alone. Consolidating their ability values was equally crucial. Even though Ron and Ace were both competitors on the path of heroes, Loki did not think this was a bad thing. Only competition could bring growth. Moreover, she had not expected that Hestia would go this far in this matter, especially regarding the ownership of the title. She lightly shook her head and, because of her conflict with the shorty, did not continue insisting, "Pretend I didn't say anything." As for the title, you can vote among yourselves. Why was everyone trying to persuade her not to act impulsively? When the gods cast puzzled gazes toward her, Hestia did not feel as though she were sitting on pins and needles. After all, only she knew that Ron's various ability values had long since reached the theoretical limit of the fauna system. And such crucial information could not be announced in front of so many gods. Moreover, she had not yet reported the level up to the Adventurers Guild. The problem is, Ron has truly already become a LV3 adventurer. Why don't any of you believe it? Perhaps because the consecutive breakthroughs were too astonishing. Before the goddess could explain further, just as Loki declared the nominated title, Brown Hyena, Void, the most influential goddess present, the goddess of beauty, Freya smiled brightly and looked around at the many gods present. I actually think the title Tarnished is quite good. After all, he has accomplished a feat great enough to shake the entire world with Ron, this child, setting the standard before them. Those so-called geniuses will only be set off by comparison, their aura of genius fading away. I wonder what everyone here thinks. Since Freya says the title makes sense, of course we have no objections. Explained this way, the title no longer seems so inexplicable. Let's call him Tarnished. I wonder whether the other adventurers will have any objections. The influence of the goddess of beauty, Freya, was beyond doubt. Most of the male gods present chose to raise their hands in approval of the title proposed for Ron by Hestia. With an overwhelming number of votes, it surpassed the previous nominations. It was just that, for some reason. Even after securing the title Ron wanted, the goddess did not feel happy at all, especially when she noticed Freya's meaningful smile. Why does it feel like there's a trap? At least the result is good. Hestia could only comfort herself like this. Watching the gods gradually leave the divine council, she did not linger and prepared to return to the Familia's residence to bring this piece of good news to Ron. Yet she did not expect Loki, who had never gotten along well with her even in the heavens, crossed her hands behind her head, and, with narrowed eyes, reminded her, "Shorty, from now on, pay a bit more attention to Freya." Thanks for the reminder. As for what Hestia had just said, Loki had no intention of asking further. She absolutely could not give that woman any opportunity to show off. However, after leaving the Divine Council Hall, she quickened her steps and found Hephaestus. Loki rubbed her hands together, with not the slightest elegance expected of a goddess. About Ron's level ascension, do you have any exclusive information? Which aspect do you want to hear about? Is it really, just like Shorty said? If the title isn't satisfactory, then they use this divine council to select a LV3 title again. It was hard not to feel curious. Would there really be an adventurer who could ascend levels consecutively within such a short interval? She could not help clicking her tongue. It feels a bit exaggerated. She could barely be considered a witness to Ron's growth, and also knew this guy's steady personality. He would absolutely not allow Hestia to fool around at the Divine Council. Hephaestus slightly frowned, then nodded. It is very likely true. Then Hestia really isn't responsible enough. If it were a child of my familia, I would absolutely make him raise his abilities to the limit of his current potential. Then we should consider the matter of ascension again. After obtaining the accurate answer, Loki's gaze turned somewhat wistful, though it was mostly helplessness. Why was it that Shorty could have such good luck and encounter such an outstanding familia member? If he had appeared in her familia, she would definitely have groomed him as her successor. Hephaestus only smiled without speaking. In her mind, she could not help recalling the information Ron had revealed when he first underwent level ascension and specially invited her to attend the celebration banquet. Limit value. The limit value of the fauna system. Without giving too much reminder, she spoke in a casual tone. Since it involves ability values, it's not convenient for me to reveal it to you. Compared to the feat he created in Aura Rio, the talent Ron truly possesses is only more exaggerated than what you imagine. Back in the heavens, being a riddle speaker was one of Loki's few sources of amusement, but when such a thing happened to herself, Loki only felt extremely irritated. This woman definitely knew inside information. But for gods, the cruelest thing was that when a miracle was placed before them and their curiosity was completely aroused, what awaited them was only an abrupt stop. The specific situation is not convenient for me to say. As for the matter of the elf secret realm and the branch of the great sacred tree, you may need to pay more attention to it. When the time comes, I will have Ron go to your familiar residence to find you. Such an obvious reminder from a friend, of course Loki could understand the meaning behind it. Since the secret Ron possessed was even more astonishing than the talent he displayed, then it was indeed necessary to reconsider how to handle relations with the Hestia Familia. The grudges from the heavens, within the nearly infinite time of the gods, were nothing that could not be passed over. After coming to Rio to develop her familia, she cared more about how to look after the children of her familia. I estimate the familia expedition should be ending soon. Finn and Riveria should return to Rio within these 2 days. When that happens, I will push forward this matter. Besides, facing Hephaestus's gaze, Loki narrowed her eyes and lightly shook her head with a smile. I actually think quite highly of Ron as well. Being able to scrape nearly 20 million Valis from Xanas, Ron truly had not expected such an unexpected windfall. After all, the reason Xanas had been able to stabilize his rule over the Familia was precisely because of his excellent methods of exploitation. He could continuously provide Soma with the materials needed to brew divine wine. Setting aside the expenses of running the Familia and purchasing materials for divine wine, this guy had still managed to accumulate such an enormous sum of wealth before fleeing Rio. It even was almost close to the Apollo Familia's liquid funds. It could also be considered as continuously adding bricks and tiles to the development of the Hestia Familia. He did not linger any longer. As he prepared to return to the Familia's residence, he looked toward the girl standing where she was. Since he had more or less earned quite a bit thanks to her information, he casually asked, "Xanas is already dead, so what do you plan to do next?" With Xanas, the captain of the Familia, having been executed in this alley, the Soma Familia would certainly elect a new captain to maintain normal operations. Lily had no intention of facing the god Soma. Relying on the magic Cinderella, whether leaving Rio or hiding her identity and continuing to live in this city that had troubled her for more than 10 years, she still had no clear plan. Continue being a supporter. But how could she face her extremely disgraceful past, those adventurers whose weapons she had stolen? Lily did not believe she deserved forgiveness. Until this period of time, because of Ron's appearance, she had become a figure drifting on the edge of the Familia. Lily finally clearly realized after leaving the so-called umbrella of the Soma Familia, it was not as though it was raining in Rio. No matter where she went, she was unquestionably still someone on the margins. The girl's somewhat childish face carried a smile of relief as she said seriously, "I don't want to continue being an adventurer anymore. Probably I will find a job at a flower shop. When I escaped from the Soma Familia before, 2 elders once took me in there out of kindness. Until now, I have never had the chance to say sorry to them." In truth, Lily still did not have the courage even now. She only wanted to compensate as much as possible for the losses from the flower shop being smashed, and also leave herself a reason to remain in Rio. Before they parted, Lily paused slightly in her steps, the corners of her mouth curving into a gentle arc. "I don't know through what channel you learned about those disgraceful parts of my past. I also know that those experiences are not worthy of sympathy or forgiveness. But without you, I probably would have had a hard time gaining freedom. Thank you. As a supporter at the very bottom, I really can't help you with much. But if there is ever something that requires assistance, you can find me at the Dear Flora flower shop." And then, at the end, the girl whose back had never bent even after suffering bullying and mistreatment from her Familia companions bowed toward Ron in gratitude. "Mister, I wish you victory in every battle. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 139. Chapter 139, Prophetic Dream, Dragon, Destruction. 19-20 words. Your title has already been decided. It's the one you wanted tarnished. We finally managed to secure it for you from the Donatus. Just after returning to the Familia's base, even though the Familia had already grown to this scale, the girl still had that same innocent and lively personality. As usual, she was sitting on the steps at the entrance of the Familia residence. The moment she saw Ron appear, she immediately rushed toward him impatiently. As if like a wife who had been alone at home, welcoming her husband back after a long day of work outside, while also telling him the news that she was carrying their child. Even without the intervention of the beauty goddess Freya, Hestia was confident she could have secured the title tarnished in the Donatus anyway. At worst, she would have simply given the gods present another shock. However, before she could throw herself into Ron's arms, seemingly having heard the news, the other members living in the Hearth Mansion base began coming out of their rooms one after another to watch. Still, that did not stop her from declaring her claim right in front of so many children. Linking her arm with Ron's, she spoke proudly, "Too bad they didn't give me the chance to properly show off the fact that you've advanced to LV3 at the Donatus. In a way, that's fine too. I actually think it's better to hide your strength a little. Lady Hestia is right." After experiencing the war game with the Apollo Familia, it was not that Ron had an inflated sense of self. In the current situation, wanting to completely hide his strength was absolutely a luxury. Besides, now that his adventure level had risen to LV3, he at least had the qualifications to step onto this stage, rather than always remaining in a passive position. Ignoring the conflict with Xanis, his gaze swept over the gathered Mikoto, Daphne, and Cassandra, and he said with a relaxed smile, "All the matters in Rio have already been dealt with. Our exploration target will be the middle floors of the dungeon. Make full preparations. We depart tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it." As a victim of the Souls-like style dungeon, Mikoto clearly understood that what awaited her would be a road even more dangerous than the war game. But the improvement of her fauna gave her a constant stream of motivation to face monsters stronger than anything she had seen before. On the other hand, Daphne and Cassandra, who had just joined the Familia, exchanged glances when they heard the next exploration plan. Their expressions were complicated. They did not question the captain's decision. The middle floors were not particularly difficult to explore. In a normal adventurer party, as long as the average strength reached LV2, it was basically possible to travel there and back safely. Something still feels a bit strange. Daphne frowned. At present, within the Hestia Familia, both the Captain Ron and Yamato Mikoto were LV3 adventurers, yet they had not even explored the middle floors. Could it really have developed to this extent relying only on the monster difficulty of the upper floors? The curiosity deep within her mind finally overcame her rationality, and she could not help asking, Captain Ron, isn't the exploration target a bit too conservative? How exactly was he supposed to explain to them that his dungeon was very unusual? After all, relying only on words, it was difficult to describe the dungeon's overwhelming malice. Only those who had experienced it personally could understand just how difficult dungeon exploration could be. Ron did not deny it. Normal progress. Daphne, I'll have to trouble you with the preparations before exploration. Once we reach the middle floors, you'll understand why our exploration progress is so slow. No problem. Having come to a brand new Familia, Daphne naturally carried the mindset of growing stronger, not continuing to muddle along. Preparing before dungeon exploration was also something that went without saying. However, the words Ron had left unfinished not only failed to satisfy her curiosity, but instead made it grow even stronger. Leave this kind of thing to me. Do we need to hire supporters tomorrow? Then let Cassandra take on the role part-time. After all, she's also a logistics-leaning healer in the party. Daphne nodded seriously and did not pursue the reason further. After all, through the Hestia Familia's recruitment of members, the general situation could already be roughly inferred. Even though it was an excellent opportunity to expand, their own goddess and captain showed no intention of recruiting adventurers and still maintained the current scale. The first thing that came to her mind was the ancient ruins located on the 10th floor, as well as the final answer Ron had not denied regarding the dungeon anomaly incident. None of the layers of mysteries had received a reasonable explanation. Whether it was the unknown environment of the dungeon or the secrets Ron possessed, Daphne was filled with anticipation. And all those expectations would tomorrow receive a complete explanation. Let's arrange it like this for now. Now that the Familia had developed to a certain extent, the advantage was clear. Ron no longer had to personally handle every matter himself. And before they set out to explore the dungeon, there was only a little more than half a day left. During this time, he could devote himself entirely to training and adapt to the qualitative transformation brought by his recent ascension. At present, Ryu and the foolish cat girl Anya both had things they needed to deal with. It would hardly be appropriate to keep troubling them over training matters as well. Thinking of this, Ron turned his gaze toward Mikoto. Since both of them were LV-3 adventurers and had only recently ascended, he decisively extended an invitation to the girl. Miss Mikoto, would you like to spar and adapt to the power of the new level as soon as possible? The adventurer who had once guided her had now grown to the point that she needed to chase after him. Mikoto could not help feeling somewhat complicated, especially after witnessing Ron's performance during the war game. Yet she was not discouraged. Compared with monsters, one would only feel frustrated. What she was more curious about now was this: with both of them at LV-3 adventurer level, just how large was the gap in strength between herself and Ron? The girl's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Please go easy on me. After joining the Hestia Familia, Cassandra's daily life had not changed much. If one had to describe it precisely, it was probably that she had been influenced by the hard-working atmosphere within the Familia. As a healer, did that mean serving as the recovery tool after Ron and Mikoto injured themselves while sparring? Compared with her former Familia where everyone competed to win the favor of the gods, this atmosphere could not have felt more normal. She had not forgotten that tomorrow they would be exploring the dungeon. As night gradually enveloped Rio, Cassandra chose to rest very early. The lack of other entertainment late at night was only a secondary reason. The main one was that today she had used healing magic at high intensity. The price was extreme mental fatigue. At least the atmosphere isn't as strange as the Apollo Familias. I just hope tomorrow's dungeon exploration goes smoothly. Though the exploration area seems to be the middle floors. With Captain Ron and Daphne's strength, there shouldn't be any safety threats, right? Lying on her side on the bed, the girl carried out a bit of psychological self-suggestion before sleep. As waves of exhaustion continued to wash over her, Cassandra soon sank into slumber. But when she opened her eyes hazily within her consciousness, the scene before her made her jolt awake instantly. A dragon capable of tearing them apart with ease was staring directly at her. And after that, Cassandra completely lost the ability to sleep. Middle floor region, 17th floor. Just as Loki had guessed, once the Familia expedition reached the 50th floor and defeated the female humanoid monster, everyone began their return journey. During that time, they also encountered worm-type monsters never seen before. I always feel that many changes have been happening in the dungeon recently. The floor boss that appeared on the first floor, as well as worm-type monsters and a humanoid floor boss that the guild has no records of. While returning to Rio, the leader of the Familia, Dame, despite being a prum with a youthful appearance that did not match his age, had that deep and solemn gaze. The events that had occurred recently kept giving him a very bad premonition. Perhaps the commission to subjugate the Black Dragon is drawing closer and closer. The one who answered Finn was Aurario's strongest mage, Riveria. Her smooth emerald green hair fell over her shoulders, and as a member of the elven royal family, an icy aura naturally emanated from her. As the purest-blooded elf, her beauty went without question, and the passage of time had left no trace upon her long-lived body. They were carrying out a Familia expedition. They had not gone purely to kill monsters. Their purpose was more to investigate information about the deeper floors so that other Familias could explore more smoothly. even though, for now, no other familia had been able to reach the deep floors. Hard to say for the moment. Let's return to Rio and rest for a few days before dealing with those tedious matters. Hopefully Loki. That fellow won't cause too much trouble. Once they had reached the middle floors, returning to Rio was only a matter of time. The faint pain in the thumb of Finn's right hand kept giving him an ominous premonition, as though something bad were about to happen. Yet in the current area, there were no monsters capable of threatening the familia's safety. So the root of the problem could only lie with Loki. But just as the familia's party was returning in an orderly manner, the ground in the distance ahead suddenly began to tremble. Immediately afterward, a gigantic monster came into view. Its physique was extremely robust, and the striking bull's head clearly revealed its identity. An otherwise unremarkable monster. However, the minotaurs gathered on the 17th floor stretched as far as Finn could see. Had the dungeon produced a monster feast? Before he could issue any command, the young man saw a very familiar figure. Ace Wallenstein, clad in armor and holding a short sword, had already launched the first attack against the herd of monsters. There was little to say about the battle. With Ace's LV5 level, dealing with minotaurs posed no difficulty at all. But as the minotaurs were slain one after another, the intense panic it caused made the herd scatter in different directions, fleeing toward the shallower floors. This is bad. We have to hunt down those escaping minotaurs as quickly as possible. If those LV2 monsters manage to flee into the upper floors of the dungeon, it will definitely cause trouble for other adventurers. Finn felt a splitting headache and could only give the order to pursue. If this ends up causing a major incident, I don't even dare imagine how severe the Adventurers Guild fine will be. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 140, Chapter 140, Not Truly Fearless, Just Unwilling to Stop Moving Forward. 1991. Words at the residence of the Hestia Familia. A faint coolness drifted on the breeze, yet it could not dispel the burning eagerness in Daphne's heart as she prepared to head into the dungeon for exploration. Even though the destination was the middle floors, she had already traveled there countless times back when she was part of the Apollo Familia. But thinking about the recent abnormalities appearing in the dungeon, as well as the secrets possessed by Ron, even with a conservative objective, she still maintained an extremely high level of enthusiasm. However, when her gaze stopped on her friend Cassandra, the corner of Daphne's mouth could not help twitching. It was still the same gloomy appearance, long blue hair covering her cheeks, yet it was still clearly visible, the girl's heavy dark circles under her eyes. Cassandra, you didn't have nightmares again last night, did you? Knowing that at critical times this girl would always either suffer from insomnia or dream about something bad, Daphne truly did not know how to evaluate it. After all, before joining the Hestia Familia, she had already reminded her that if she really could not control the nightmares, then she should give herself psychological suggestion before going to sleep. Facing the helpless gaze of her close friend, Cassandra timidly nodded. That dream had simply been too real. Even though the monster in it had never been seen before, she could somehow recognize it instinctively. An ancient dragon filled with an archaic aura, as though its years stretched endlessly through time. Appearing in today's dungeon expedition, tearing Captain Ron, Daphne, and Senior Mikoto along with herself into pieces. The dream had been so vivid it felt as though she could personally experience that despair. A very terrifying dream. A dragon. A dragon will tear all of us apart. You must be joking. Daphne did not even know how to begin complaining. Encountering a dragon in the middle floors, did they really think the intelligence provided by the Adventurers Guild had been collected for nothing? She did not answer. Only when she looked through the open wooden door of the Familia residence and saw the goddess Hestia and Ron coming out did she gently shake her head, though she still reminded her seriously, dreams with no basis like that. Try not to bring them up in front of Captain Ron. How could a dragon possibly appear in the middle floors? Don't lose your nerve before we've even started the dungeon exploration. Should she really not remind Ron? Cassandra could not make up her mind, yet merely recalling that scene allowed her to clearly feel the tremor rising from the depths of her soul. Until Ron stood on the steps in front of the familiar residence. The girl clenched her teeth. Even if she were to be pushed to the margins of the familia in the future, she still had to explain the danger from the dream to Captain Ron as much as possible before the tragedy occurred. So under Daphne's pained expression, Cassandra finally gathered the courage to speak. Captain Ron, could I borrow a little of your time before the dungeon exploration? Following the sound of her voice, Ron looked over. His gaze fixed on the low-presence Cassandra. The obvious fatigue on the girl's face, and the clearly visible fear deep within her pupils. It was only the familia's routine dungeon exploration. But when he thought about the particular nature of the ability she possessed, the skill, 5-dimension Troya, he could roughly guess that she had something she wanted to explain. Especially with Daphne standing beside the girl, looking rather troubled. Ron's speculation was quickly confirmed. This was also the reason he had agreed to let Cassandra join the familia. She could foresee dangers that existed in the future. As for why Daphne chose not to believe her, that also had to do with Cassandra. Dreams that could foresee the future inevitably came with a price, and the magical interference she emitted caused others not to trust her. He did not put on the airs of the familia's captain. He smiled lightly and nodded. No problem. If it's not convenient to talk here, you can change to another place and tell me. After receiving Ron's clear reply, a trace of disbelief passed through Cassandra's dim eyes, though even more of it was unease about what would come next. After all the previous bad dreams had eventually come true. Yet she could not understand why even her most trusted friend, Daphne, was unwilling to believe her words, let alone Ron, whom she had only known for a short time. Following his steps, they came to a nearby garden. After hesitating for a moment, the girl finally organized the words of her explanation. Captain Ron, you might not believe it if I say it, but I have a feeling this dungeon exploration will be dangerous. It's just, last night, I had a nightmare. Facing a Souls-like dungeon, when had any exploration ever been without danger? But Ron could not say something like that aloud. Looking at the girl's worried expression, he did not deny it and replied in a bright tone, could you tell me about it? What happened in the nightmare? She had even prepared herself to be brushed off. But when she heard Ron's reply, Cassandra rarely lifted her head. The blue hair that covered her cheeks slid down beside her ears, revealing a particularly delicate face. Delicate was not meant as a derogatory word. If Seer was the devilish girl next door older sister type, then she was an innocent and naive young girl who had not yet experienced much of the world. At this moment, the unease in the girl's eyes instantly disappeared, replaced by disbelief. Even the stammer caused by her nervousness vanished at this moment. A dragon. A very ancient dragon. It will tear all of us apart. A very ancient dragon. After hearing Cassandra's detailed description, Ron did not immediately give a reply. Instead, he recalled the dungeon intelligence provided by the Adventurers Guild. Infant dragon. A rare species monster. The strength possessed by an infant dragon could be said to rival that of a floor boss. And the great feat by which the sword princess Ace Wallenstein broke through to LV2 had been accomplished by killing an infant dragon. With the strength he currently possessed, a monster of that kind could not pose any threat at all. Instead, after the hybridization with the Souls-like dungeon, what kind of changes might appear was something Ron had not truly encountered yet, so it was difficult to judge. However, a certain boss from Elden Ring suddenly appeared in his mind. Ancient dragon. It can't be that we'll actually run into that kind of weird thing, right? Thinking of this, Ron could not help the corner of his mouth twitching. And the girl standing opposite him, when she noticed the strange look on his face, and that he had not given an answer, the hope she had just formed shattered in an instant. Cassandra understood how could anyone possibly believe such an absurd dream. That feeling of frustration was difficult to describe precisely. Just as she was about to avert her gaze to face Ron's reproach, the next words left her stunned where she stood. Thank you for the reminder. The boy's tone was gentle. Yet the determination in his eyes was unprecedented. However, even if we really encounter that kind of danger, we will definitely find a way to overcome it. Was he believing what she said? Staring blankly at Ron's departing back, Cassandra felt as if she had entered another world. Being untrusted for such a long time had led to internal exhaustion and self-doubt. But the trust she received at this moment was like a ray of light piercing through the darkness, falling into the desolate depths of her heart. "What are you still standing there for? We're about to set off." Only when Ron's urging reminder reached her ears did the fear deep within the girl's heart completely disperse. She nodded heavily. Even the smile blooming on Cassandra's face was exceptionally radiant. "Captain, I will work hard." After briefly saying farewell to Hestia, although he knew clearly that today's dungeon exploration would definitely not be as smooth as imagined, Ron still did not change his mind. To set sail for a dream, to cross endless darkness for the future he desired. It was not that he was fearless. Compared to the various potential threats within the Souls-like dungeon, he was simply more unwilling to stop moving forward. His gaze swept across the members of the Hestia Familia, already prepared and ready to depart. Ron's tone was relaxed. "Everyone. Let's go." The dungeon. After receiving guidance from Lord Takamikazuchi during this period and becoming proficient in combat techniques, Belle Cranel did not choose to remain in Oro. A towering tree cannot grow inside a greenhouse. A true adventurer must be tempered through blood and tears before shedding immaturity and achieving growth. Moreover, the current Belle now had a goal he needed to pursue. Breaking the previous world record and shortening the legend of the fastest breakthrough to 16 days. In the war game with the Apollo Familia, defeating the strong with the weak and completing a sweeping victory, creating a feat in Oro that shocked countless gods. He had only seen that unstoppable figure in the magical projection of the war game. But that did not mean Belle was unfamiliar with the adventurer who had long been walking ahead of him. From Lord Takamikazuchi's introduction, his understanding had become even more comprehensive. Ron had never received formal martial training. After conducting simple training in Oro, he began exploring the dungeon. And afterward came the successive miracles he created. What the boy longed for in his heart was precisely such an epic as those in heroic storybooks. Even though the goal was distant, it was the very source of his effort. Belle did not choose to explore together with Kashima Oka and Chigusa, the seniors in his familia. During the stage of a rookie adventurer, the upper floors were the most suitable place for him. The monsters encountered would not be particularly strong. With the techniques taught by Lord Takamikazuchi, he would definitely be able to clear them smoothly. And the reality was not much different from what he had predicted. The goblins and kobolds he encountered, these ordinary monsters, could all be swiftly finished off with the dagger in his hand as long as he made use of his advantage in speed. After consecutively slaying several weak goblins, the boy looked toward the passage leading to deeper floors. Without lingering in the slightest, he decisively stepped forward. According to the reminders from the seniors in his familia, as long as he did not rashly head toward floor 6, he would not encounter too many threats. "I'll explore around here for now." After gradually adapting to the dim environment of the cave passages, Belle swept his gaze around and fixed it on the small goblin in the distance ahead, holding a wooden club. When he stood ready, preparing to face the battle with the monster in his best condition, the boy suddenly felt that far ahead of him there seemed to be an extremely enormous monster approaching in his direction, the ground trembling briefly because of it. What's going on? He did not have much adventuring experience. But Belle still sensed the aura of danger, until in the distance ahead a bull-headed monster with an unprecedentedly robust build and dark skin entered his sight. It held a great sword. Seemingly due to the influence of the dungeon, an obvious mutation had appeared. Within the Minotaur's crimson eyes was overflowing killing intent. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 141, Chapter 141, the White Rabbit and the Minotaur 1893 words, just what kind of monster is this? According to the intelligence provided by the Adventurers Guild, among the monsters distributed in the shallow floor region, there was absolutely nothing like the enormous creature before his eyes, this unprecedented giant. An extremely robust physique. Its body was so large that even within the cave passage it seemed somewhat cramped. Every time it moved, Bell could clearly feel the ground continuously trembling beneath his feet. That chilling greatsword merely brushed against the wall. Yet the extremely sharp blade shattered the wall, sending chunks of earth breaking off. With each breath, one could even see the white vapor expelled from the nostrils of the Minotaur. This kind of oppressive pressure was difficult to accurately describe with words. But from the monster before him, he felt an intense threat of death. This was absolutely not something he could deal with. That was the only thought in Bell's mind right now. It was also what Lord Takamikazuchi had told him when encountering monsters you cannot defeat, then run. I have to get out of here. Facing the Minotaur's gaze head-on. The oppressive pressure brought by the powerful monster made the boy's legs tremble slightly, but his desire to survive ultimately overcame the body's instinctive fear. He decisively turned and sprinted away. As if sensing something, this aberrant Minotaur, one that should originally have appeared in the mid-floor region, but had been strengthened after the dungeon became souls-like, its left hand, clenched tightly into a fist, smashed fiercely toward the wall. The force carried by the punch, the moment it struck the earthen cave passage, instantly spread into spiderweb-like cracks, while chunks of soil continuously fell along the passage, attempting to block the adventurer's path of escape. And even the speed the Minotaur burst out with even exceeded that of most adventurers, while within the monster's crimson eyes burned an intense hatred. It seemed as if it wanted to tear every adventurer to pieces. Noticing the same thing, and clearly aware that if he were struck by those falling chunks of earth he would die completely at the monster's hands, the boy could only slow down and dodge. As for an escape route, there was no time for Bell to think too much. He could clearly feel the powerful monster pursuing him, the distance between them constantly closing. I must survive. He still had a goal he needed to pursue. And the boy longed to encounter a true meeting in the dungeon. I absolutely have to survive. The price of fleeing in blind panic was that he could not observe his surroundings in time. After being tripped by loose stones on the ground, the pain of scraped wounds surged through him. There was simply no time for Bell to think. After scrambling quickly to his feet using both hands and feet, he continued to flee toward the dark cave passage ahead. Until the boy reached the end of the cave passage. After the Familia's expedition team had developed to a decent size, not only did their forward speed not slow down, it actually improved somewhat in terms of efficiency. After all, ordinary monsters could be easily dealt with without Ron even needing to act. As the exploration team quickly passed through the shallow floor region, that feeling of constantly being watched by the dungeon did not appear. Only when they reached the 5th floor did that familiar sensation sweep through him again. Why does this feel a bit? According to the patterns summarized so far from dungeon exploration, once the aberrant monsters had been mostly eliminated, they would stop spawning, and the floor's environment would return to normal. That was also the reason Ron's exploration progress had been slow. High-intensity combat. Eliminate all the aberrations on the current floor, preventing trouble for other adventurers. His gaze swept across the surroundings. Even the goblin and the ugly creatures they encountered were at the level of stray dogs by the roadside. Ordinary adventurers could casually kick them to death. Then what exactly was the cause of this feeling of being watched? Ron could not figure it out. Perhaps the reason lay in Cassandra's prophetic dream, before reaching the 13th floor, which led to the mid-floor region, and was called the First Dead Line. An ancient dragon was probably waiting for him. However, as the team continued forward, thanks to the comprehensive enhancement of bodily senses brought by an adventurer's level increase, even the trembling of the ground was still precisely captured by him. This was absolutely not something shallow floor monsters could cause. And early morning was precisely the peak time for dungeon exploration. Ron frowned slightly and decisively said to Mikoto, "This floor feels very wrong." Let's deal with the problem first. The girl nodded solemnly. Without asking too many questions, she quickly followed Ron's pace, leaving Daphne and Cassandra looking at each other, somewhat unable to understand the situation. What's wrong with the shallow floors? But as familiar companions, they did not ask and simply followed closely. Following the source of the ground's trembling, Ron ignored low-level goblin and dungeon lizards, tracking the source of the disturbance. Even though the cave environment was dim, his speed did not decrease at all. When he quickly arrived at the corner of this passage, what came into view was a monster with an unprecedentedly enormous body, dark skin, and particularly developed muscles, along with the conspicuous features of a bull's head. There was no need to guess the species. A minotaur. Even though he had not encountered such a monster in the dungeon before, the bull-headed creature before him clearly looked like a souls-like, heavily muscled minotaur. The great sword in its hand was something an ordinary minotaur could not possibly possess. This enormous monster did not seem to have noticed his arrival, and was moving toward the end of the cave passage. Why does it feel like this is a little different from the minotaur I remember? Standing still and staring at the dark-skinned minotaur in the distance, Daphne's pupils suddenly contracted as she searched her memory. A minotaur was a monster that existed only in the mid-floor region. Even ordinary LV2 adventurers could be seriously injured if they were not careful. Why would such a thing appear in the shallow floors and with so many changes? The monsters she had encountered before. In her impression, they only possessed a sturdy physique comparable to that of an adult human. But the giant monster before her made the cave passage appear cramped. That chilling greatsword alone was nearly comparable in size to the one Ron carried on his back. Even without directly facing the monster, with her own LV2 strength, Daphne could still feel a clear sense of oppression from the dark-skinned minotaur. She subconsciously looked toward the boy. Just as she was about to ask, Ron seemed to guess what she was thinking. Don't be surprised. This will be our future dungeon exploration routine. They had not even truly begun dungeon exploration yet. This damn troublesome thing had already prepared a surprise for him in the shallow floors. He drew the short sword tied to his legs and equipped the shinobi prosthetic on his left arm. Just as he was about to fight, standing beside him, Mikoto, through the gap not completely blocked by the huge body of the dark-skinned minotaur, saw the adventurer trapped at the end of the passage. Very familiar. Especially that striking head of short white hair. The minotaur had not directly chosen to kill. Instead, it was more like it was playing with its prey, trying to completely crush the adventurer's psychological defenses. The girl decisively drew her katana. Captain Ron, the adventurer the minotaur is blocking, is a member of Lord Takamikazuchi's familia. A member of Takamikazuchi's familia. They could be considered allies in Oro. Ron had been able to develop smoothly in the dungeon, until now thanks to much help from Takamikazuchi. And now a member of that familia had encountered the threat of an aberrant monster in the dungeon. It was the right time to repay the favor. Mikoto moved quickly. But compared with Ron, who used the shinobi prosthetic based on the Sekiro template, she was still a little slower. As the mechanism shifted, the grappling hook shot toward the minotaur. The target was extremely clear. The greatsword the minotaur was swinging. When the sharp hook tightly wrapped around the sword's hilt, the pulling force combined with the power generated by the minotaur's swing caused Ron's figure to vanish from where he stood in an instant. Then I really should help. But when Ron drew closer and finally saw the face of the adventurer trapped at the end of the cave passage by the minotaur, his mood became subtle. White hair. An appearance that could be described as boyish. Bell Cranel. At this moment he was pressed against the wall, the red pupils of his eyes filled with fear, and the helplessness of being unable to resist a powerful monster. Wait, because of the butterfly effect caused by his own appearance, had the original protagonist of DanMachi, Bell, ended up becoming a member of Takamikazuchi's familia and even encountered a minotaur's pursuit in the dungeon. But Ron had no time to think about this strange feeling right now. What he needed to deal with now was killing this aberrant monster. Thanks to the high mobility of the shinobi prosthetic, he arrived behind the monster in an instant. and because of the grappling hook's pull. The Minotaur's greatsword swing was greatly delayed. But as the rope was cut, the artificially created fast and slow slash swept forward with tremendous power toward the white rabbit trapped in the corner. The greatsword struck the wall. It instantly split open the soil above, and thick dust along with falling chunks of earth came crashing down toward the novice adventurer trapped in the corner with nowhere to dodge. The motion of the greatsword's swing was somewhat sluggish. But Bell had no time to think about the reason. Chunks of earth kept falling from above, and when the monster's attack was already close at hand, he subconsciously closed his eyes. Clang! A crisp metallic collision echoed through the cave passage. If he were cut in half by the greatsword, it probably wouldn't hurt, right? But as the dust gradually dispersed, the boy did not feel any pain. He opened his eyes in confusion, and brushed away the stones covering his body. A shadow completely enveloped him. But it was not the Minotaur. Instead, it was the figure of an adventurer holding a short sword, deflecting the monster's strike. That figure standing in front of him felt strangely familiar to Bell. After experiencing a life-and-death threat, his mind had already stopped thinking. He only saw the huge Minotaur forced back several meters by Ron's comparatively slender figure. Then, as if taking care of him, the adventurer who had helped him at the most dangerous moment slowly turned around. Bell would never forget that handsome face. And his casual reminder, if the rookie adventurer of Takamikazuchi's Familia isn't injured, then run farther away now. As for the rest of the fight, leave it to me. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/Tito Viller. Chapter 142, Chapter 142, and then, Ron became the object of a boy's admiration. 1278 words appearing in the shallow layers of the dungeon with the powerful bearing of a Souls-like warrior. Whether the surrounded adventurer was Bell or merely a passing stranger, Ron had a reason he had to exterminate it. Without having endured Souls-like torment, ordinary adventurers simply could not fight against it. He glanced around but did not find any trace of the Sword Princess, Ace Wallenstein. To some extent, this was also a change brought about by the Souls-like influence. It caused Bell to encounter danger ahead of time. I just don't know how strong it actually is. Through the practical sparring he had yesterday with a same-level member, Mikoto, Ron had gained a simple estimate of his own strength after completing his level sublimation. Within LV3, he should not encounter too many threats. The monster before him was the best whetstone, after he resumed exploring the dungeon. Thinking of this, he decisively drew the rapier tied to the other side of his thigh. From Bell's perspective, today's dungeon exploration was an unprecedented experience. Encountering a monster he could not defeat, and believing he was about to die, the very person he was chasing as his goal appeared in the dungeon by coincidence, and even offered him help. He knew that in the coming battle, staying here would definitely become a concern for Ron. Taking advantage of the brief moment when the monster had been knocked back, the boy's rabbit-like agile body tried to quickly retreat from here. However, sensing Bell's intention as well, and after receiving the unique reinforcement of the Souls-like influence, the Minotaur possessed intelligence that other low-level monsters did not. Although the target before it was someone the dungeon wanted to kill, that did not prevent it from hunting other adventurers. But when the Minotaur quickly shifted its attack direction, its enormous body pressing toward Bell while it swung the giant sword gripped in its hand, clang. Facing the Minotaur's sweeping greatsword, even with a short sword, Ron skillfully executed a parry. As he gradually adapted to his body's strength, the Minotaur's movements appeared extremely slow in his eyes. The sharp blades collided, producing a crisp sound. Not only that, with a lift of his arm, he cleverly deflected the Minotaur's attack. Looking directly at the monster's crimson eyes, Ron only felt an irresistible itch in his hands. Eager to fight the Minotaur before him to his heart's content, he spoke in a relaxed tone, "Your opponent is me." A novice's dungeon exploration should originally be calm and unhurried. But facing the Minotaur before him, whose paper strength had already reached the level of a LV3 adventurer, Bell could only scramble away in panic. After pulling open a safe distance, the white-haired boy finally stopped running, and the lingering fear in his heart gradually faded. As for why the Minotaur that had been within arm's reach, which could have killed him in the dungeon at any moment, had not taken action. When Bell turned around to look, he saw a tall figure, like a city wall, standing in front of the monster. With no other concerns remaining, the battle was instantly ignited. More precisely, it was Ron's one-sided crushing. After 2 consecutive greatsword attacks were easily parried by him, the Minotaur's anger was completely ignited. The monster abandoned its greatsword and switched to a more convenient attack method. A fist covered in white bone armor. Every punch the Minotaur threw was already too fast for Bell's eyes to follow. The whistling fist wind carried power that seemed capable of tearing everything apart. The dust stirred up began to obstruct vision. He could only see that agile adventurer's figure using his high mobility to calmly evade the monster's extremely frequent attacks. And every slash Ron delivered, the dust barriers deliberately stirred up by the Minotaur to block vision were swept aside by flashes of sword light, leaving shocking wounds across the monster's body. Grrr. The blood spurting from the wounds, along with the monster's ear-piercing howl, told the story of the suffocating helplessness it felt in this battle. If he wanted to end the fight, it would be very simple for Ron. Until now, he had not used any combat art, relying purely on bodily reaction and technique to fight the Minotaur. He treated it as an early adaptation to the combat level of the middle floors. The final conclusion was, in terms of defense, the Souls-like built Minotaur was clearly much tougher and harder to kill. As for the rest, with Mikoto's strength, she should be able to kill it alone. When countless wounds covered the black-skinned Minotaur's body, and its slowing attack frequency revealed that it was already at the end of its strength, Ron abandoned the idea of further testing. Lowering his body again, he avoided the straight punch aimed at his head as well as the chilling greatsword that the monster seized with its other hand and chopped down. A dual-wield combat art unique to monsters. Too slow. The short sword sliced open the skin of his palm. Blood spread across the blade. With his swing, a crimson slash completely enveloped the Minotaur. Ash of War, bloody slash. Even though the short sword's blade did not directly touch the monster, the tearing effect produced by the combat art still cut the Minotaur before him in half at the waist. The massive monster that had carried such overwhelming pressure did not even manage a final counterattack before death. Once its waist was severed, it instantly turned into dark gray dust and scattered through the cave passage. A dark purple magic stone, the size of a fist, fell to the ground. Soul shards +5. After flicking away the traces of blood on the short sword, Ron calmly sheathed the weapon. Only when his gaze swept toward the white-haired boy in the distance he could see the obvious stunned expression on Bell's face. Running into the original protagonist in the dungeon, what kind of strange development is this? After thinking briefly, and because of his relationship with Takamikazuchi, he casually asked, "Are you all right?" If Senior Ron hadn't been here, then I probably wouldn't be. Recalling the encounter with the Minotaur still made the boy shudder. But when reason returned and he looked at Ron again, Bell's voice was filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Senior Ron." From the perspective of a bystander, he had witnessed the entire battle. If he had to describe it, the word would be effortless. The Minotaur had not placed any pressure on Ron at all. He easily neutralized the monster's attacks and suppressed it throughout the fight. Most importantly, Ron had not been an adventurer for long. Yet within such a short time, he had already widened the gap between himself and all the adventurers of Orario, including Bell. Bell did not know how to describe it. If the miracle Ron created in Orario, which even shook the whole world, had made Bell certain after becoming an adventurer that Ron was the goal he wanted to pursue, then now, after truly sensing the gap in strength and witnessing Ron's extraordinary bearing in battle, Bell's yet to truly begin adventurer's path was left with an unforgettable memory. And deep in his heart, an admiration for Ron was born. And then, with eyes full of admiration, he asked tentatively, "Senior Ron, may I boldly ask how you managed, in such a short time, to become such a powerful adventurer?" Hearing the white-haired boy's confusion, Ron felt an indescribable strangeness in his mood. He recalled the intense malice of the Souls-like dungeon during this period. So don't tell me you also want to become a Souls-like master. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller, Chapter 143, Chapter 143, Since the future is yours, then prove it to me. 1343 words when he had just become a rookie adventurer. Including up to now Takemikazuchi, the god of war, had provided a great deal of help. After learning that Bel Cranel had become his member, and had encountered danger in the dungeon, Ron could not possibly stand by and do nothing. However, when Bel asked why he had grown to his current level in such a short time, that was a question he really didn't know how to answer. He couldn't exactly say it outright. Because he was cheating, and hated by the dungeon, so every day was hell difficulty. But thinking of how, in the original storyline, the white-haired boy before him had also been an unprecedentedly overpowered existence, it seemed he didn't need much special guidance from him. After thinking for a moment, Ron decided to respond in the simplest and most unadorned way: put in the effort, and rely on having just a tiny bit of talent yourself. Was the answer really that simple? Realizing his question had been somewhat presumptuous, Bel nodded heavily. He didn't forget to explain, I heard a lot from Lord Takemikazuchi. About Senior Ron. My name is Bel Cranel. Thank you very much for your help, Senior Ron. It was nothing. He was already calling him Senior, so what more was there to say? To be honest, Takemikazuchi really was the most righteous god Ron had ever seen. As for the dungeon's abnormal changes and Bel encountering a minotaur in the upper floors, this also counted as giving Bel some simple psychological reassurance. Ron nodded lightly. The monster you encountered should be a minotaur from the middle floors. For some reason, it suddenly appeared in the upper floors. It's an isolated incident. When you explore the dungeon in the future, just be a bit more careful. Don't give up on the path you've chosen just because of the setback you've encountered now. After receiving a concrete explanation of the incident, the gloom pressing on the white-haired boy's heart gradually dissipated. And upon hearing encouragement from the person he admired and pursued, Bel's eyes were filled with surprise. He hadn't expected that his senior would be so easy to get along with. Thank you, Senior Ron. Becoming an adventurer, that's the goal I came to Rio for. I won't give up easily. I just hope that in the future, I can catch up to your footsteps, Senior. Facing Ron's encouraging gaze, the boy only felt boundless motivation. Even if that figure ahead was extremely distant, just as his senior had said, as long as one was willing to put in the effort, it was absolutely achievable. Thinking of this future, Bel nodded heavily, his eyes filled with longing. Even if it's difficult, I will become an adventurer as strong as you, Senior Ron. Quite ambitious. He was gradually overlapping with that unyielding white-haired boy from the original story. Even Ron hadn't expected that the disrupted storyline would return to its proper track at this moment. Before leaving, from the corner of his eye, he glanced at Bel, who remained in place watching him off. It also counted as providing Takemikazuchi with some of the few bits of encouragement and support he could offer at this stage. After all, in a Souls-like dungeon, for a rookie adventurer like that rabbit, rashly following a party into the middle floors and facing those troublesome monsters would be no different from courting death. After weighing it for a moment, Ron smiled brightly. Bel Cranel. Since the future is yours, then. Prove it to me. The battle with the dark-skinned minotaur ended quickly. As for the brief exchange between Ron and Bel Cranel, Daphne hadn't paid attention. Her mind was overloaded, processing what had just happened. So this is what future exploration will be like. It could be said that the captain had indirectly admitted that the recent abnormal changes in the dungeon originated from him. And the fact that his strength had grown to its current level in such a short time was entirely traceable. Daphne found it hard to imagine just how harsh Ron's previous exploration routine had been. How severe must the difficulty have been? Looking at it this way, it seems that only reaching LV3 to barely explore the middle floors is actually very reasonable. But why would that trigger changes in the dungeon? The girl couldn't help muttering to herself. And in her understanding, only gods could trigger changes in the dungeon. But how could a god possibly become an adventurer of the Hestia Familia? In the final analysis, it was very likely that Captain Ron possessed an extremely outrageous skill. After becoming a member of the Hestia Familia, what awaited her would also be this level of difficulty. Yet Daphne did not feel any hesitation at all. A dungeon of extremely high difficulty, the final rewards it brought would only far exceed her imagination. Looking at the tall, upright figure of the boy walking ahead, whose emotions showed no fluctuation, she couldn't suppress her curiosity. Will it always be this difficult in the future? More or less. The dungeon has consciousness. Ron had already deeply experienced this when encountering the mimic War Shadow. It could even spawn monsters in a second playthrough, retaining memories from a previous life. As they advanced deeper, even though he had not yet explored that region, he could already imagine the difficulty. More precisely, as we go deeper, the dungeon's difficulty will only gradually increase. But as long as you can adapt, the rewards will definitely outweigh the risks. Regretting it? Don't call it regret. To be precise, it's anticipation. In fact, it was more of a sense of fortune. If what Ron said was true, then joining the Hestia Familia would absolutely be the most correct decision she had ever made in her life. Daphne shook her head lightly. Her eyes were filled with emotion. If the adventurers in Rio who want to grow knew about this, at least in terms of Familia scale, I can't imagine how far it would develop. In less than half a year, it might become one of the top Familias in Rio. Who knows? Through the Minotaur, briefly informing Daphne and Cassandra about the Souls-like dungeon had not affected the team's overall morale. Instead, it made the atmosphere even more heated. After quickly dealing with the ordinary monsters encountered along the way, Ron led the team to the 12th floor, the endpoint of the upper floors. Beyond that lay the floor known as the First Death Line. Before he could even pass through the current floor, that ever-present sensation of being watched by the dungeon reached its peak upon arriving here. And that intense sense of crisis that even Ron could not ignore surged like a tidal wave, swallowing him like a small boat drifting in the vast ocean. Some time ago, when he encountered the floor boss, the grafted scion, even that boss had not brought him such overwhelming pressure. Although he had prepared himself mentally, he still couldn't help but frown. Just as he was about to remind Mikoto and Daphne to stay alert, a familiar tremor continuously spread from the ground. Even the rock walls of the cave were reshaped under the dungeon's control. The passage behind them was sealed off by abruptly rising rock, preventing any possibility of escape. The originally narrow cave gradually opened up into a vast space. A room belonging exclusively to a floor boss appeared before Ron and the others. The faint glow of the bioluminescent growths could no longer illuminate the enormous arena. Even so, within the ink-like deep darkness ahead, the massive body of a dragon was still clearly visible. A dragon. Damn it, you're making me slay a dragon this soon. Meanwhile, fully clearing out the fleeing minotaurs had significantly slowed the Loki Familia's return to Rio. However, as the team continued advancing, soon, they would reach the 12th floor. I will post some extra chapters in Patreon, you can check it out. Patreon.com/TitoViller. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.